Birds of Upper Newport Bay, a virtual training field trip, fall and winter. And this is going to be the third video of three. This will cover raptors, doves, hummingbirds, kingfishers, flycatchers, crows and ravens, gnatcatchers, and because I'm running out of room here, other land birds. Part 1, which I hope you will go through first, and I'll reiterate that in a second, has the logistics of this training field trip, what I attempt to accomplish. It also shows species in the groups: Grebes, Pelicans, Cormorants, Herons and Bitterns, and Waterfowl. Part 2 of video 2 has Gulls and Terns, Rails and Coots, and then the big group collectively called Shorebirds. This is another JDW Talks. My targeted audience on Newport Bay Conservancy naturalist training class, and first video tells you about that. Upper Newport Bay docents who have gone through that training class, and then interested public, wildlife public, or birding public. And this was recorded in October of 2020. So I'm going to show a slide from that first video, and you will see the name of the bird group. I'll show you that first, and the species within that group. And then you can pause the video, that's my recommendation, and bring up that group and its species on your Merlin app or your Audubon California Guide app or one of your field guides to birds. And so the whole idea was that you're going to learn what the groups are like, you're going to see the species names, and before you even see them on the video, you should be looking at the pictures of these birds and information on your various field guides. I have shown you on the first video how you can get Merlin and the Audubon California Guide for free and exactly how you use it. So it's going to take a little bit of effort for you to learn the birds of Upper Newport Bay. It's often said that the first species are the most difficult to learn from of beginners. Then after that it gets a lot easier. So the first group on this video, there's only one species there, is New World Vultures. I don't think we're going to get a California conda in Upper Newport Bay, though they might have roamed here way in the past. And here is a vulture. They're very light in the air, very light. They kind of waver. This was taken in San Juan Capistrano. And in fact, I had a study for a whole year where I picked up pellets of turkey vultures and had close to 4,000 and analyzed the prey remains. Basically, this is a scavenger on carrion. And for those of you who are jumping in to video 3, I am going to show you some information about each of the species. The ones in yellow, we might talk about a little bit more, but the rest of them I probably won't say much about. You could always pause the video. And vultures have a great sense of smell and sight. They can find food that's not visible from above, and then they will come down and feed. But I do have a YouTube video on turkey vultures. They have a spread wing posture, just like the cormorant did that we talked about earlier, but it has two functions here. And for this species, spread wing postures appear to serve for both thermoregulation and drying in turkey vultures. These birds maintain their body temperature at a lower level at night. They're conserving energy, so they allow their body temperature to lower than in the daytime. and the morning wing spreading should provide a means of absorbing solar energy and passively raising their temperature to the daytime level. The next group has only one species at Upper Newport Bay, and that's our osprey. And in fact, in the past, they've actually bred and had chicks at Upper Newport Bay. And here is an osprey on the nesting platform. This is around the Science Center. It's an interesting bird. It's adapted to feed on fish. You can see the feet to grab hold of the fish. In fact, I think the common name is fish hawk. Another picture. Very photographic. They're also very easy to identify. They have a very loud call that attracts your attention to this bird. They like to be on posts, and they may bring a fish back to the post and feed on it. What you may note is that if you do see an osprey, and it will sometimes completely submerge when it was trying to go for a fish diving on it, that it'll capture the fish and it will rotate the fish in its talons so that the fish is head first, and it's easier presumably to fly with a fish that is head first. So something to look for. Spend some time in each of these species. Just because you identify a species in the field, spend a little bit of time, and with your knowledge, see whether the behaviors that you've learned about each species you can actually see in the field. The next group are hawks and eagles. People always like these birds of prey, and we're going to be looking at 5 species as we go through this video. So look them up on your apps or your field guides. Get to know them so you'll be able to identify them when you see either still pictures or videos of these 5. These are generally put into 2 categories. They're either Boutios, which are large hawks that soar over the landscape and dive on their prey, or they're accipiters that are active predators against birds, very flexible, very maneuverable, very agile individuals. Eventually considered a separate group, we're going to be looking at the falcons. So we have here Boutios, accipiters on this section, those 5, and then we're going to talk about the falcons at Upper Newport Bay. So red-tailed hawks are kind of a neat bird. They have a great call. You've heard it a number of times on TV commercials to signify wildlands. They also use it to substitute for the weak call of a bald eagle. Bald eagles have a keek 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 sound, and it just doesn't sell doesn't sell cars on TV. And so you often hear a red-tailed hawk even though the species is not shown as a red-tailed hawk. Has great eyesight, can take mammals up to rabbits in size, and can take snakes and reptiles, a number of other species. This Boutio attracted my attention with its really loud call. It was off of Constellation Drive on someone's metal statuary up on the cliffs, and it usually is associated with actually woodland areas, or at least trees, and I wasn't going to include it initially on the video, but there it was on my October 17th field trip. It is a red-shouldered hawk. It feeds on small mammals, snakes, lizards, small or young birds, and it feeds from perches. You might see this on, for instance, telephone lines. It, as I said, has a loud call. It carries very far at Upper Newport Bay, especially around the Big Canyon area. And someone said it's a Boutio that thinks it's an accipiter, wants to be an agile bird. And my field guide notes say that the beating wings appear stiff, as if bird was batting the air. Often you see it doing maybe 3 wing beats, and then it soars a little bit, then 3 more wing beats. Very characteristic flight pattern. Now, if you are observant, you might see this bird of prey flying over the Upper Newport Bay marshes. It will have a white rump, and it's a specialist on meadow mice. It has a lot of interesting adaptations. And on October 17th, while I went out for a high tide, one of these flew by, and I'll show you the video I was able to get. I was really surprised I was even able to get a video of this bird. I have a 3+ pound super zoom camera. Got it in the viewfinder, handheld, zoomed in, and because things were a little bit choppy, I've reduced this to 1/4 speed. In fact, I think it even at the very beginning of the film flies over 5 Ridgway's rails. So take a look, and it appears to be an adult female northern harrier. Yep, there are the rails underneath. You can see the white rump. Watch when it turns. You're going to be seeing the underside of its wings, which is a field mark, that pattern for the female. The males tend to be gray on the back and white ventrally. So it's going to turn around. Remember, this is 1/4 speed. Hearing some sound from the airport. And now you'll see that flash on the bottom of the wing. Lots of different adaptations for this bird. Quarter speed. So a northern harrier, voles are another name for meadow mice. They actually can see in the ultraviolet, these birds, and the assumption is that they're detecting the latrines and runways of rodents who are leaving urine markers, and urine reflects ultraviolet light. If you had, for instance, a cat that was urinating in some place on the rug, you wanted to find out which place it was, and you had a UV light, you could easily see that because that spot of urine would fluoresce back at you. And they can hover in place before they dive. They're only successful in about 1 out of 10 of their dives. Accipiters, like this Cooper's hawk, this is an immature, very agile, hide and jump out and prey on bird species. It's a specialist on bird species. This was taken by the Muth Center. And in Dana Point, I have this month a adult Cooper's hawk that's coming through looking for birds around my bird feeder. And here is that bird that is sitting on a bird bath. It's a beautiful looking animal. It's an adult. Remember, the juvenile was kind of a brownish bird with streaks on its breast. And this is a bird specialist. So the Cooper's hawk. So the summary here, people say it flaps like it is arthritic. Not quite sure what they mean by that. It's an accipiter type of hawk. Now during the wintertime, we have a kind of a look-alike accipiter called a sharp-shinned hawk, and the nickname is a Sharpie. And I'm going to show you a picture of that I took on the Christmas bird count last year. It's a smaller hawk. The tail looks slightly different, but some of the coloration looks pretty close to a Cooper's hawk. This is an immature individual. And this was taken right below Constellation Drive, which is a really neat birding area of Upper Newport Bay. There are trails leading from Constellation Drive down into the bay. Falcons are pointed wing, powerful flyers. They can knock their prey out of the air and kill it just by that contact. And there are 3 falcon species in Upper Newport Bay, and I want to show you all 3. This actually taken at nearby San Joaquin Wildlife Sanctuary is our American Kestrel. The old name was a Sparrow Hawk for it because it ate small vertebrate, etc. I think it's actually eating some sort of large grasshopper here, and it is a American Kestrel. You can see there's the Sparrow Hawk is the old name. They often lift their tail, especially after landing. There's kind of a field mark there. There's lots of mortality on these birds of prey. You can see that 60% of the immatures and 46% of the adults die each year. But they feed on a large number of different prey items, but they're relatively small. This one is slightly larger than the Sparrow Hawk, but the comparison between power and what they feed on is quite markedly different. It's called a Merlin. The old name was a pigeon hawk, and its nickname is Bullet Bird because it zooms by you, boom, and that's a field mark in terms of it. Someone once said that a Kestrel is to a Merlin as a scooter is to a Hawley. And there's quite a bit of reality to that little phrase. The most dramatic falcon at Upper Newport Bay, if you get a chance to see it, is going to be a peregrine falcon. Peregrine falcon. And the old name used to be duckhawk. And here's one picture. This was taken in Dana Point. This one was taken in Upper Newport Bay. And it's the most extensive worldwide bird species. They can dive up to 160 to 217 miles per hour. It was on an endangered species list. So if you're at Upper Newport Bay, and all of a sudden all these birds suddenly, all these shorebirds, ducks suddenly take flight and form dense balls of birds, look around to see if there's a peregrine falcon in the area and is trying to pick off the birds on the edge of these dense areas of birds that swirl around to try and avoid becoming prey for the peregrine falcon. Our next group are pigeons and doves. Now, a rock pigeon used to be called a rock dove, but it's not a dove, it's a pigeon. I'm not going to really talk about. because you'll see them on power lines, on Irvine Boulevard, etc. They're not really close to the bay itself, but mourning doves are close to the bay, and very characteristic spots on the wing, has a characteristic call. And just remember that this is not an early riser, a morning dove. It's continually grieving, right? It's mourning. It's really sad, sad bird. The wings can whistle on takeoff, and they're pretty common. They're also a common urban bird, which bleeds into the Upper Newport Bay area in terms of its distribution. The next group are hummingbirds. That's usually a favorite of people. There are two resident species. We may see other species migrating through, but we'll concentrate on these two. And I have good video of this from the Dana Point area. So here we have something called an Anna's hummingbird. Those feathers of this male on its throat and on its forehead have modified structures so that when the sun hits them at a certain way, they would flash a color. So that's a structural color. And I'll show you a video of that next. I tried for a long time to get a photograph of this, and then I finally gave up and just took a video, hoping that it would show this flashing pattern. So the bird's going to move its head. This is at 1/8 speed. And if the sun hits it at the right place, you'll see that color coming off of the feathers, and then gone. Anna's hummingbird feeds on nectar, small insects, spiders, etc. It's actually named for a Princess Anna of France, whose husband had the bird in his collection. The French loved our hummingbirds. They purchased the specimens, and it was recognized as a new species. And they can surprisingly live several years. The other species that's probably even more common at Upper Newport Bay is something called Allen's hummingbird. You can see there's this rufous color of this male on its side and partly on its back. It doesn't seem to have those modified feathers on its forehead, but those feathers also flash a color. So I'm going to show you that in the next video at 1/2 speed. And this really doesn't do justice to it. It really, really is bright when it does that. Now you can tell these two species by their distinctive flight display patterns. And I want to show you that. You don't even have to see their field marks. This is a field mark. So here, let's look at Anna's hummingbird on the right. What it does is it goes up, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 feet in the air, the male, and then it just comes straight down like an elevator gone awry. And at the bottom of the J, there's a popping sound that comes from its tail feathers, actually. Well, Allen's hummingbird, it goes all the way up too, and then it comes down and it starts to go back and forth like a pendulum. There will probably be a female underneath his display pattern. Very, very different. And so spend some time looking at hummingbirds, especially when they take off. See if they show this J pattern, and you can hear that popping sound of the male, or you see one going back and forth like a pendulum. Kingfishers are really neat. We have one kingfisher, a belted kingfisher. They have a raucous call, very pronounced wing beats. We have male and female that can be told apart. This apparently is a female. You see some red on the side below the main breastband. And then I took this picture last year of a kingfisher who has a problem here. He has a fish that's bigger than he is, and it is a male. And this was again below the Constellation Drive area. So, how's it going to handle that fish? Interesting problem. And it turns out, according to what I read, that even though the fish prey may fill its throat, rapid digestion allows it to inch down the gullet. So slowly, but that fish disappears right into the kingfisher. If I had an hour or so to waste, or maybe waste is the wrong word, I probably could have recorded film of that situation. So it feeds on fish, but it could also feed on crayfish, amphibians. It dives into the water. It can go about 2 feet from the surface, and you can see it has an interesting scientific name based upon a Greek story and Greek gods. You might want to look at that. The call is a rattling call. Flycatchers are prevalent at Upper Newport Bay. We may have some small ones, small species migrating through, but we have 2 species of phoebe that I want to show you. So this was taken below the Muth Center last November. We have here a sharp-billed, keeps flying back to the same post, characteristic of flycatchers. Has kind of a salmon-like ventral area. And this is, and of course, if you had paused the video after I showed you the groups, look at those 2 species in your field guides. You should know already what this is. This is a Say's phoebe. And a lot of these flycatchers pump and spread their tail. Maybe they are trying to scare up insects so they can then go out and get them. Insect eater. This is another phoebe species. It's a black phoebe. It has a mud nest. It is more characteristic of urban sort of areas, but it is found at Upper Newport Bay. This picture was taken at the end of the boardwalk. Pretty animal. It attracts attention because it calls a lot. And insect eater, can eat small fish. In fact, there are even reports of a black phoebe eating a hummingbird. So, take a look, see what they're feeding on. Let's move on to crows, ravens, and jays. And I'm going to emphasize 2 of these. The western scrub jay are usually found more in areas with lots of trees, urban areas. But I want to talk about the American crow and the common raven. And people get questions all the time, the naturalists. How do you tell the difference between the 2? And Rosemary Moscow is a cartoonist. She's at birdandmoon.com, giving me permission to put this on this video. And you can see the common raven, a very thick bill, has a wedge-shaped tail. I call that an upside-down ice cream cone. It doesn't go caw-caw, it goes caw-caw sort of thing. It's croaking sort of thing. Crows have smooth throat feathers, basically a fan-shaped tail, not as pronounced as the raven, has a clear sort of vocalization. And there's a lot of fun that people have online about crows and ravens and how to identify them. It ejects pellets. The common raven, it actually eats carrion, eats small vertebrates. It's more like a raptor than it is a corvid. It can eat bird eggs and young. And let's see, and people ask, you know, if it's all black, crows too, don't they overheat? And actually the black plumage traps heat outside the body, and convection, winds, etc., air, dissipates the heat. So you see ravens in the middle of the desert, and you may wonder about that. The American crow is omnivorous. It can eat pretty much anything. It does feed on bird eggs and nestlings, etc. They eject pellets. And people have a lot of fun with crows because an old term, which probably nobody ever uses, a flock of crows is called a murder. I don't think you'd say, oh, there's a murder of crows going by. You'd say there's a flock of crows. And so there's been a lot of puns about crows and a flock of them and being a murder. So for instance, their question, are two crows in an attempt at murder? Got to think about that. Or how about this one? It's minus 17 Celsius. You see several crows sitting on a power line. What do you have? A murder in the first degree. I like puns, especially ones based upon science. And in fact, I'm going to show you another one next that actually can discriminate between crows and ravens. The original form of this pun was scientifically inaccurate, and there was a discussion on this Corvid research blog that finally they got this pun so that it is anatomically correct. The original pun had the wrong number of feathers, so someone came up with this, and it says crows and ravens have 10 primary wing feathers, the big ones at the end of the wing called pinion feathers, the most evident of which look like fingers, especially pronounced in ravens. Crows have 5 evident pinion feathers, whereas ravens only have 4. So, drum roll. One difference between a crow and a raven is a matter of opinion. You'd have to have good eyes and good optics to be able to see that with the emphasis. Gnatcatchers, we have 2 species of gnatcatchers. If someone comes out here from the East Coast, they want to see our California gnatcatcher. It is a threatened species. Blue-grays are here during the wintertime. California gnatcatchers are here as residents all year round. Now, I took this picture at the end of the boardwalk. I thought it was pretty good, but I'm not so sure that I would want to show this around too much. In fact, let's do justice to this gnatcatcher and put that background and put part of it in the back of this animal. And what you want to do when you're looking at gnatcatchers is you want to look at the coloration under the tail. If it's mostly black as it is here, this is a California gnatcatcher. If it was mostly white, it would be a blue-gray. And just to emphasize that. During the breeding season, and this is from Dana Point, the males get this black cap, very distinctive. They also have a call that sounds like a mew, like a cat. And they feed on insects and spiders. They glean prey from the foliage. The California gnatcatcher is a threatened species. a U.S. threatened species. And again, a warning that there are 2 species during the wintertime here, and you try and look underneath the tail. California gnatcatchers is a flagship species, and so if you were a naturalist, a docent, and you pointed out a California gnatcatcher, you should point out that it acts as the symbol for the campaign to protect coastal sage scrub habitat. It's a flagship species. By achieving protection for the California gnatcatcher, which they did do, the situations of many other obligate coastal sage scrub species, ones dependent on that habitat, was also improved. It's an important species. Another group are mockingbirds and thrashes. We may actually have a California thrasher at Upper Newport Bay, but I want to emphasize the northern mockingbird. And they flash white in the wing. They may show white in the tail as well. They are mimics. They mimic other bird species. And so sometimes you hear, oh, well, that's a gnatcatcher. It turns out it's a northern mockingbird. They tend to be urban birds, and we see them on the fringe of Upper Newport Bay pretty regularly. They feed on insects, berries, etc. I love their scientific name, which is Mimus, which is a mimic, many glottis tongue. So this is a many-tongued mimic. And some people get upset about this because males may sing all night if they're unmated. And you just gotta wait for those hormones to disappear so it stops singing. There is a small warbler species that's resident at Upper Newport Bay. We may get warblers coming through different species during migration. They are mostly in more 3-dimensional habitat. But this is called a common yellowthroat. The female looks pretty drab, but it has a characteristic shape and posture. This was taken at Upper Newport Bay. The male is a lot more dramatic. And you can see why a nickname that some people have put on this is El Bandito, the bandit having a mask. Or maybe we should call it the pandemic warbler. It's considered the most widespread warbler species. And its call, you teach people its call sounds like witchity, 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 witchity. Neat little bird. There are a number of ground birds that we may see if you go out and do a field trip during the fall and winter months. 3 of them are here. There may be other sparrow species that can be found as well. And let's take a look at them. So here I am on the boardwalk. See this bird? It comes on the boardwalk, goes around, it goes toward the brushy area. I look at it a little closer, look at it a little closer. Look at that bill. That bill must be some sort of seed-eating bill. You can just make out the kind of a rufous underneath its tail. This was taken in Dana Point, giving you another indication as well. And this one is called a California towhee. California towhee. Its old name was brown towhee. You might see that in field guides. It's a common resident. Singing males may sing to a hubcap. They may attack a hubcap because they tend to be very territorial. And they glean and scratch and litter, etc. Relatively large sparrow-like bird, California towhee. These birds here are winter residents. They come in only during the winter months, and they're named for their coloration on the head. And you can see it's a white-crowned sparrow. It's by the Muse Center. A better view from Dana Point. And as you can imagine, sparrows are going to be seed eaters. That's a seed-eating bill. There are lots of interesting things about white-crowned sparrows. They have different dialects, and the ones we have in Upper Newport Bay are probably from north of San Francisco. Their song, according to some people, sounds like more cheesies, please. Can't quite see that, but birders have tried to figure out bird songs by using human words. So they will come in during the summer. You won't see white-crowned sparrows at Upper Newport Bay. Here's another species. You see it doesn't have a white striped head, white and black. It has streaks on its breast. In fact, there's one spot that's kind of a pin called. This was taken at nearby San Joaquin Wildlife. This one was taken at the exit of Big Canyon. They tend to be very prominent, sing a lot. They are song sparrows. They sing a lot. There are 31 subspecies in the U.S. They vary quite a bit. In fact, they once were thought to have a lot of different species. We now know that they're just variations. And this breast spot may not be present in young. Just be careful of that. And then here are a whole bunch of possible human words to describe this song. I don't know about that. It's a cute way of trying to teach people songs of birds. And I think this is the last one, which are our finches. We have a house finch, which is basically an urban bird that spills into Upper Newport Bay. The female is streaked, and you can see the bill is again a seed-eating bill. The male shows a lot of red. And here is a summary. Europeans call them linnets, and I think I've explained most of that. Okay. So what you've done is, if you've had patience to go through all 3 videos, is we've gone out to Upper Newport Bay on a field trip looking at the major common birds in fall and winter. And if you follow my instructions and had your field guides in hand, look up the birds before you saw the pictures of them, and go out in the field, you will have a leg up on observing and naming species. And if you're a naturalist trainee, there are other things just besides naming the species that may be important to tell the public. They have behaviors, there are conservation stories, there are migration patterns here, etc. And I hope that you will go out in the field and start to observe and start to identify birds. There are led field trips that once this pandemic is over, you could always join one of them, either by Sea and Sage Audubon or even the Upper Newport Bay Naturalists, to help you hone your skills. And it's something that you will not regret. So this has been another of my JDW talks on YouTube. I have a number of virtual birding field trips. Life of the Naturalist, Adolphus Seaman. Videos on birding optics, owl pellets, vulture pellets, and moon migration birding. I also have an expertise in genealogy, in U.S. Census, finding people by location, and Ellis Island immigration. And so I've put them all in this one YouTube channel rather than separate them out into two channels. So enjoy, and I hope you enjoy Upper Newport Bay, especially once this pandemic is over.